Welcome. I am Ahaumna AhMaYah, and I am being joined today by Alexander Tarris and Dr. Charlles Bohdy to share with you about this incredible, miraculous healing waters called the Nanoplasmoid Spa technology that I've had the privilege of working with my clients over the past 2 years or 3 years. And for those of you who don't know who I am, a miracle worker and a soul liberator. I do in-person healing retreats and activations at my home. And I am with the inventor of this technology, Dr. Charlles. If you'd like to share a little intro about yourself, and then Alex, you can introduce yourself.
My name's Charlles Bohdy, and I'm the product developer, and I don't really claim to be the inventor of anything. I believe that the good Lord gives us creative ideas and witty inventions. That's Proverbs chapter 8, and I'm just the humble steward here to embody them and bring it to the world.
Alex.
So the last 20 years, I've been a product researcher. I'm basically the expert that is supposed to guide practitioners and everyday people at home if they want to either make a big investment in a wellness piece of equipment or set up a home sanctuary, or if it's like a clinic and they want to invest in a lot of different modalities. It's really confusing. I do a lot of due diligence on different modalities and then deliver all those findings in a consultative approach.
I brought us together today because I've been talking about this tub for a while from my personal experience of having clients come through it. Yet I'm not of understanding the full science of what's actually happening and the different aspects of this.
It came originally from chickens. I had been tasked to develop a protocol for reducing pathogen-based mortality in poultry barns, and I was working with an ozone technology and a different water technology, as well as a super nutrient. And I was introduced to the inventor of what is now marketed around the world under the brand name Cocoon, K-A-Q-U-N. That technology was invented in Spokane, Washington by an American. It's an electrolytic technology. My former partner is a chemist metallurgist, and he was working with a rare ore sample processing precious metals. When a certain amount of rare platinum group metals built up on these electrolytic collection plates in a water bath, he noticed bubbles forming in the water. And being a chemist, he started testing the water, and he found it was loaded with molecular hydrogen, H2, these long chain isotopes of oxygen, O8 to O64, and long chain heavy peroxides. And then after some time, he started working on animal husbandry projects, which is the poultry connection. And then eventually in 2004, they decided to start working to promote it overseas under the auspices of this doctor from Hungary. So that's the backstory on what I call the prior art to my technology. Through a series of events, we ended up going our separate ways, and that was the basis for my working to create a new system based on that prior art. I started working with geometry and structuring technologies to improve what I call electrolytic oxygenation, or some studies call electrolytically reduced water. And I realized that one of the main problems the original prior art technology had, and that Cocoon has, is that the gases that are being generated are escaping by and large. So I started working with different scientists that were working in the realm of the nano, and I ended up developing what we call a nanoplasmoid generation system. The gases that we generate or liberate through the electrolytic process or introduce through external input ports, they're being given an electrical charge that is negative, and then they're self-organizing inside of nanobubbles into toroidal plasma gas bubbles. And these are between 2 and 100 nanometers. So these are smaller than many viruses. They're hundreds of times smaller than the aquaporins in the skin, and they're able to penetrate into the body. That's the technical aspect of how we're making the water. We're making these electrically charged bubbles. You can add in external gas sources. You can add any other gas or blend of gases and take those gases to the nanoscale. We can deliver things like CO2, oxygen, ozone, molecular hydrogen, a nitric oxide, a breathable blend of that, hydroxygen or HOH, sometimes called Brown's gas, and they all do different things physiologically. The light bulb went off for me as to the mechanisms behind the why when I read the study at Cambridge University on the nanoarchitecture of the endothelial layer in 2019. What they discovered is that our bodies are nanobubble generators. When we inspire, we're bringing in O2 and N2 nanobubbles, and when we expire, we're creating these CO2 nanobubbles. And they line the entire 60,000 miles of our circulatory system, capillaries, veins, and arteries, and then also the surface of our skin as well, the lowest layer, the endothelial glycocalyx. The mechanism behind the efficacy was quite clear. Your body's now being given trillions more times of access to these scopic gas bubbles. The gas inside of the bubble has a negative. Right. That's what sets us apart from simple nanobubbles. I drew the toroid inside of the bubble in our original patent drawings, but it was 2 or 3 years later we got the actual scanning X-ray microscopy images from UC Irvine. That's an actual X-ray scanning transmission X-ray microscopy that was done in a video at UC Irvine. That's a still right out of that video. And you can see the 8 linked spheres forming the toroid inside of the nanobubble. And the bubbles you're looking at on the screen vary between maybe 2 and 100 nanometers in size. They're quite elegant and quite different looking than a simple nanobubble.
Generally, it's going to be atmospheric gases, the same stuff you're breathing in all the time, naturally, just like if you blew a bubble as a kid. But in this, we are seeing an inner ordered structure inside of this bubble, and highlighted, as you're saying, the fact that we're seeing 8 smaller bubbles inside in a ring. It's probably a lot to get into from a physics standpoint, but some of what you've done with structuring and geometry has produced this inner structuring of gases.
Yeah, and plasma in nature takes basically only 2 forms.
This is my first time noticing this, but you have the inner bubbles there, but if you take a look at the edges, the bubble itself, there's more bubbles on the outside.
It's 8 and 8, Alex, when you count them. For our Chinese viewers, that's the symbol of wealth, is the number 8. It's actually referred to it as my wealth water, but it's really just amazing physiologically and what it can do for the body. When you can restore voltage at the same time you're creating and giving the body more access to healing redox signaling molecules and gasotransmitting gases, the technology is very forgiving. The body decides where it's lacking, what it needs first, and where to prioritize self-healing. I don't claim that this technology treats anything. We provide the body with electrically charged building blocks that it then uses.
It's like a supplemental respiratory system from the standpoint that the bubbles are small enough that when you soak, the bubbles are small enough to pass through the pores of the body, through the skin. When I'm doing research and reviews on modalities, I always wonder, what's the dosage of something? What does somebody really need therapeutically to make enough of an impact? When you soak, you're able to get enough of these bubbles, enough activity everywhere. If you have something going on, it doesn't really matter where it is, you have enough that can be delivered systemically throughout the entire body because we're going through the skin. And that is something that I find very unusual.
Before we jump into that, I'd love to add some things here because my audience is very aware of the energetic and spiritual aspects of life and creation. And I actually see the Yan Yun flows in these bubbles right now. I don't see the toroidal flows that are siphoning energy. If you really look at this, you can see that Yan Yun flow happening right here in these bubbles, which is that immortal blueprint. I remember, Alex, when we first got this tub, you said if there was a fountain of youth on Earth, this water is it. My first experience in the waters was immediately after receiving stem cells in my brain when I was navigating my neurological health crisis. And the pain that I was in was incredible. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it through this because I had so many concussions and my body was like, let me use all of this to heal as much as possible. I had the most blinding migraine for about a week in Florida, and we got home and the tub was waiting for us there. Alex got it set up on the back deck so that I could get into it. And within 5 minutes of being in the water, the headache, this horrific migraine, was gone. I was able to drop in and tap into a parasympathetic response that my body could utilize as stem cells. I've been called a miracle of what I was able to heal. I was bathing in these waters every single day throughout my healing. Multiple doctors and practitioners, my neurological team, my vision team were wildly impressed on what I was able to achieve from where I was. I personally feel that these waters were a huge part of it because the way I describe it to people is our brain is constantly trying to find the most efficient path energetically based on the energy that we have available to us. And most people don't have enough energy. When we are able to bathe in these waters and be flooded with more than enough energy, the brain is no longer, oh, I need to prioritize and take energy from here and put it there to heal. The brain's, oh, we can do everything right now in this moment without having the herxing and the negative effects that you would have when the brain has to take energy from somewhere else to heal this one thing.
Inflammatory effect of hydrogen is so well documented. And that's something that we have seen with other practitioners. We have a practitioner in Las Vegas that was able to measure a sympathetic to parasympathetic shift in under a minute repeatedly with multiple clients. Molecular hydrogen is this amazing, powerful antioxidant. And when you reduce the inflammation burden throughout the body, everything begins to work better. When you talk about energy, you have to have a certain amount of hydrogen on the cell membranes for the mitochondria to accept the oxygen. And that's our power plant for every cell. There are many mitochondria, there's not one per cell. So it becomes such an amazing cascade of healing responses when you start to get the mitochondria to function.
And you bring up something to the energy aspect. Something that a lot of people can relate to and have heard about is electrons and protons. One way that our body uses energy currents in mainstream science can be in part measured as having to do with electron flow. It's really proton and electron flow. We find whether somebody's had a trauma in the brain, they've had a lot of inflammation going on in the body, maybe a lot of systemic acidosis. The other side of that is also a conversation about electrochemistry when we start to talk about things like electrons and protons. If you can get into a modality like this where it's providing an abundance, 1.5 billion bubbles per milliliter, and it keeps on saturating the longer it's running, we can deliver extra energy in the form of electrons. That's something that the body will use for these fundamental cellular processes. A lot of times when we think about inflammation, most of the information that you come across, they don't really take it to electrochemistry, down to the biophysics level, even though that is out there. There's plenty of information and plenty of research around that. It's just not mainstream. If you want to understand deeper modalities that can systemically produce that instantaneous shift everywhere, then you really have to delve into modalities that you know for sure are having an effect on electrons and making that available to the body. That's something that is very unusual about this water. Most water is not going to be that rich in electrons, nor rich in these additional gases. Something powerful and unique about what's being created here with this water. If you had a device that took water and split it where hydrogen was released, so much healing potential is lost. So many resources in the form of hydrogen escapes out of the water. You're dissolving hydrogen. You might get a max of 1.5 parts per million. Even after you're running a device like that in water continuously, no matter how long you run it, the max you can ever get is that. And most of that's constantly escaping. We're taking a resource like hydrogen and these other gases, and it's going in a structured, ordered, energized state inside of a bubble, but can't escape. Once it's in the bubble, it's not going anywhere.
That's true. Once they develop that net negative electrical charge, and it's very powerful in our plasmoids, they become relatively metastable compared to simple nanobubbles. They can't come together again because of electrical charge. They're forced apart like same pole magnets, and they're not able to get big enough to rise to the surface and break, even though hydrogen's so light. We see it staying in the water, and that's relatively unique. I've taken a grill lighter into a bathing session with Cocoon with some of the Chinese and Japanese hydrogen bath technologies, and most of them make micro bubbles. So the water looks nice and milky. You get this wonderful placebo effect, but you can light the bubbles as fast as they're leaving the water, and they'll
Mm.
just snap, crackle, and pop when they hit that flame of the grill lighter. As fast as they're being generated, they're being liberated and lost.
I also wanted to talk about hydration briefly too. It's something that I notice in the health field is not talked about a lot, which is crazy because everything works in terms of the human body. Hydration is that central piece of why all that stuff works. And you mentioned that the bubbles are small enough to pass through the aquaporin channels. There's many different types of channels in the membranes of cells. And when it comes to properly hydrating the inside of a cell, you have intracellular water and you have extracellular water of varying qualities, characteristics, and forms that make all the magic of life happen energetically. But these aquaporin channels are just a tiny little membrane channel that go through and allow different things to pass through, including what we need to make a certain type of very special structured quality water inside the cells. These tiny little channels and membranes on cells, that's where all the other good stuff comes in as well. Specific types of ions and specific types of gases. One last point too is that when you get to some of the most fundamental processes inside of a cell that have the greatest health impact, a big piece of that is redox function, our oxidative signaling molecules inside of cells. But a lot of that magic is inside. We have our antioxidant and we have our oxidants, and cells produce. If we were to boil down all the things that can happen to a person health-wise, dis-ease, and we can leave mental, emotional as a further conversation, but just talking hyperphysiological here for a second, even though they are interconnected. When you have imbalances in redox, that throws off everything, all the rest of the other cell functions. What's so interesting, it is a fountain of youth water from the standpoint, there's a lot of these fundamental signaling gases that can be delivered inside of the cells. That's unusual, but has one of the greatest impacts on the body. When I'm doing research on modalities out there and equipment, one criteria that I always look into is what is this modality doing on a cellular level? That's mostly what I care about. And then I compare things. Now, what I just talked about there is correlated with what's on the screen here that Ahaumna will chat about, which is we're getting back into the health of the blood cell.
These are 3 of my clients that came and stayed with me for 7 days. These are different women. And what I have found when we're looking at live blood, changes don't necessarily last. Anyone could take a supplement and see an immediate change in the live blood and say, look, what has happened? This is the change. And you could be convinced, oh, this is the miracle supplement. What I want to know is, what does the blood look like 48 hours later? Is it holding that change? A lot of times it will go back to what it looked like before. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is people the day they came to my home. And what you're seeing on the right-hand side is after 7 days. This was multiple live bloods that have consistently stayed, changed, and altered. And there's more space, more room to breathe. The inflammation patterns that you're looking at on the left, the toxicity has been relieved from their body and their mental health. If your blood is looking like this on the left, your mental health is struggling. You have stress and anxiety and fear and are navigating things that keep you in that sympathetic fight or flight mode. The number one thing that people say immediately, oh, I feel so relaxed and at ease in my body and in my mind and clear. In Chinese medicine, we know that the blood is directly correlated to your mental health. So not only are we having these physiological shifts that Alex and Charles have talked about, and my work is around the spirit and the mind and the emotion and the whole being. It's not only these physiological shifts, but people feel at ease and less stress and less anxiety and less fatigue. And the changes that happen in the blood have held day after day. They continue to improve day after day, and then they actually hold. It's not just, oh, this is an immediate change, and then a few hours later, the blood goes back to whatever that person's normal.
I notice a tremendous difference in quality of sleep after soaking. It's relatively profound.
For me, a bath will supercharge me. And I can't do them at night because I'm like zing, full of energy, especially if I do ozone, I'm turbocharged. If I do CO2, I'm having a blast with God. And I'd have all these downloads. When you said it was your wealth water, I've actually have wealth frequencies that I work with and meditations that I've created. I do them while I'm in the water. And I've had injections of wealth come in through using the water in that way. Like you said, we are nanobubbles. I've blended the world of this is a spiritual technology because it's water and it's accessing these etheric realm of plasma. And we can use that to connect to the divine, to meditate in, to activate our body, to heal, but also to become more of ourselves, more empowered.
Most ozone treatments, if you have a really sick person with a large bioburden, it can result in a Herxheimer reaction so strong that the people don't want to do it again. I just don't see that with the tub. Even if they're in a horrible health state when they start, there may be a minor Herx, but it's relatively unpronounced compared to other modalities, especially ozone based.
Can share a story about my mother who came and stayed with us a couple years ago. And she, if anyone was going to have a horrible herx, it would have been her. Her body has had over 40 different surgeries. Her entire spine is metal. She has CRPS and has had cancer numerous times. And we invited her to come and stay with us. And we had her in the tub every day for at least 3 hours. We had her doing ozone, and then we had her doing regular oxygen concentration going in with the oxygen and hydrogen. Before she came, she was unable to even walk maybe 50 steps without needing some assistance and some support from extreme pain. And when she left, she was walking a mile with rarely any pain. And she had absolutely no herxing at all, other than emotional processes that started coming up and releasing, which we were navigating that, and a lot of clarity and insights, even surrounding why this all manifested for her was happening from how relaxed she was able to get and how much time she was able to spend with herself. And you never want to see your parents suffering. And her case is really extreme. She had no herxing from the amount of ozone we were giving her was a lot.
I think she said her pain level was a 10 most days, and by the time she left, it was a 1. And that's a pretty powerful statement.
That was a very complex condition. I see that with a lot of my clients. There's never just one issue going on with people these days. Everything's interconnected. If somebody's really doing their due diligence, they might have one symptom, but it's 6 different causal factors. It depends on how far you want to go in terms of figuring things out. You got to think about what modalities can streamline the therapeutic process and touch all the various causal factors. People can come in with complex conditions, many different causal factors. And because this is working on such a fundamental level in the body, it will indirectly and or directly support all the various causal factors. And when you're in a parasympathetic mode, that is likened to being receptive mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relax, regenerate. A lot of people have that deep relaxation, almost into an altered meditative state within the first few minutes, and then it becomes more and more pronounced once they're in there for 20, 30, 40 minutes. Part of the challenge as a practitioner or a healer is, can you actually help a person get into a receptive mode of healing? So you'll see clinics out there and they're just throwing all these modalities at people or getting them to try to do all these different protocols. And that person is literally just not even in a receptive mode. So it's like, are they really going to get the best outcomes from the $10,000 worth of protocols you threw at the person? Not usually. So that's another thing I see people skip over is really making sure a person is in that receptive mode to do the healing process. So something like this, when they're in there, they become more vulnerable, open, receptive to something that might come after the water. And usually a great thing to do, as Ahaumna has been doing, is diving into the emotional, mental, and spiritual energetic domains afterwards, because how it prepares the person. They enter into a different state of being. There's so much more we could dive into here, but how are we doing on time?
Yeah, I don't know because we'll have to do edits anyway.
Oh, okay.
There's
Great.
something else that's important to share.
Well, Alex, you mentioned the metaphysical side, but when you start to fix the mitochondria, the water begins to get it functioning again. And when you pair this with red light frequencies or multi-frequency photobiomodulation, that's the charger for these mitochondria, and they go hand in hand. I like to call it the mitochondrial kickstart. And I know you've done a lot of work in that regard.
I've also done a lot of different explorations with our tub. I'll charge the water and then I've shined different color light into the water. One that I really like to use for advanced states of consciousness is magenta, is a violet and red come together. I'll go in, put my singing bowls onto the water and I'll knock them a few times. The water is picking up that frequency. Then I will lay in and have phenomenal meditations, communication, conversations with God. I've charged the water up so the tub's not running because obviously herbs and things. And then I've added in rose petals, like the rose infused into the nanobubbles. I've added raw milk in after it's been charged and have had so many incredible experiences working with different frequencies and different lights and different things that have been phenomenal.
The bubbles make a waveguide, so it helps the water hold whatever frequency you're introducing it to. On our new tub system, we have what I call the opera resonance system, where we're converting rife and sound frequencies to sound. We've got scalar frequencies, chakra balancing. You can set the waveforms. And it's so powerful when you're delivering it through water because it's more conductive than air for transmission of frequency and sound specifically. They did a lot of research with light and color therapy in the 1920s, pioneering PhDs and MDs that worked in that realm. It may sound woo-woo to the hard-laced science guys, but if they dig into the old books, there's tons of real well-structured research in those areas.
I love what you said about the waveguide. So that comes back to hydration again. To be honest, that is one of the more challenging things to accomplish. I know it sounds basic, but a lot of people I've heard, like 95% of people are dehydrated. It's still true. And so eventually all that has to do with electromagnetics and sending signals and all kinds of stuff. Waveguide is such an interesting topic because what's the quality of guiding those waves essentially when you really get down to it? And what kinds of modalities out there really can do that? I'm intrigued by what modalities can enhance everything else out there. So if you're one of those people that is doing everything, right, and you have 500 supplements, I'm not recommending that, but you got a bajillion things you're doing and you're trying to always select for the best food, we always have to really ask that question. That's all great. All those things are good. But really down on a cellular level, do we really know what's going on? And hydration is a huge central part of that. And also even the topic of signaling is why peptides are even so popular today, because that is an amino acid way of sending a chemical signal.
That's right.
So I'm always intrigued in my research of modalities out there, if we can ever learn, is something having an effect on a signaling level? You brought up red light, near infrared photobiomodulation. Again, that stuff only works because of the signal. They call it the photochemical response, which is going from a signal to producing a chemical metabolic response to that.
Just yesterday, Alex, I was in public and I heard this older lady talking about how she was diabetic. She was sitting at the table next to me at a restaurant. So she was chatting with the waitress and she said, one of the things the doctor told me is that I'm dehydrated. And she said, I just don't understand it. I have a bottle of water right next to my bed and I drink it all day long.
Exactly right. Yeah, I harp on this point a lot with people. Just because you drink water, that it doesn't actually mean anything, really. It's H2O for sure. However, what we've learned in water science over decades now is that water will have many different forms. So for most people, you're totally right. They keep drinking it. Doesn't even matter what the volume is, but they keep drinking and drinking. Most of that will just pass right into the toilet. It's just gonna. So the analogy I give is you could water your plant a couple ways. You could give it enough water that it needs. But imagine if you just were like, I'm just gonna pour 1,000 gallons on this plant right now. Think it's gonna hydrate off that?
Yeah. I think we've really covered the hydration, but I want to go back to something that I want to add around the supplementation and the bioavailability of things. This may not actually be something that I've even shared with you, Alex, but in my advanced muscle testing work that I do on both myself and my clients, there are a few things that we test for. A lot of times the yin of the body will say no, it doesn't need something when actually it really needs that thing, but it's going to cause a healing response. The body's, I don't have enough energy for that healing response. And so the body will show that it doesn't want that supplement. But actually, when we test it for, does the yin need this supplement? It will show a yes. When that's happened for myself, I will drink a glass of the water and then I'll test again that supplement. 9 times out of 10, it reversed the sway, and I was actually able to take that supplement without having the negative healing reaction. That was huge for me when I was navigating my healing crisis. I'd have intense reactions to anything beneficial for the body. And I would test, you're going to have a vagal response to this. And I would drink the water and then I would test again. And it would show that with the water, I'm not going to have a vagal response to this supplement. So I could get what's actually beneficial for me and not go into a healing crisis pairing it with the water, which for me was monumental because there was so many beneficial things that I needed that my body would have been so adversely responsive because I was in such a state of fight or flight that it would have been a horror to have had those things.
Yeah, that's such a great point. There's a lot of people that are in that boat and they need a lot of things and their body is not going to be receptive to it because there's an order, there's a sequence always to healing. And the more chronic and complex that sequence becomes, a little more complex as well. But again, there it is an order to things. So it's about dialing in what's the priority, what things comes first, and then because you have that in place, these other things can work. And it comes back to signaling. It comes back to hydration. So
I like to look at it from my neuroscience realm of just everything for me has come back to the brain because of what I navigated through. And to me, the brain has two modes. It has creation mode and it has repair healing mode. And in creation mode, that's sympathetic. And people get stuck there and are not creating because they're in the fight or flight response. And a lot of people are stuck in creation mode, in go, hyper functioning stress response. And you can give them all the things under the sun, amazing therapy and body work and supplements and modalities that they keep cycling back and keep having the same problems over and over again because they were not put into the brain switching into healing mode first. And that was my biggest aha moment when I'm so grateful that the tub arrived when it did, because if I wasn't in such an extreme state of physiological crisis at that time, I might not have really been able to. My body is so intelligent. I really understand viscerally how something impacts the body. And getting in the water in that state of high crisis for the first time, I was able to register this immediately shifts my body into a healing mode. And that's what I track then back to why I get the flip in the muscle testing when I drink the water, because it puts the brain into healing mode so that everything else that you do works so much better. It can work. It's been my experience with my clients.
And I'll just throw out there for people to do their own due diligence. The current trendy description of this is cell danger response. So that's really popular right now, but it explains that response. Like we can have a stressor or be in a sympathetic to something in our life or our environment. The cells literally do the exact same thing, of course, microcosm, macrocosm. I want to throw that out there because knowing about the cell danger response, it is a serious priority to take a look at. But in my own research, I have not found that many things out there that are capable of addressing that response outside of things that are working on the emotional, mental, and energetic, spiritual. And all that stuff is debatably maybe more a priority before you head into the physiological. However, if you have the opportunity to also support the physiological at the same time, that's great.
That's one of the most consistently reported effects from practitioners, from MDs to NDs, utilizing the tub with their clients, is that they see this immediate relaxation occur. And the clients want more treatments or more access to the water. They're not having to promote it or sell it or anything. They just get them in at once, maybe the stubborn client twice.
And I just want to clarify something, Charles. You now have available a couple different things. You got the prefab spa tubs, a couple different designs, and then you also have a portable type of unit that can be applied to anything that holds water, essentially. So somebody's tub at home or a jacuzzi or whatever it is. But correct me if I'm wrong, that unit also is capable of processing for drinking water.
Yeah, it's a lower level version of the drinking water system that I've developed, but it's the same water that would be in the bathtub. That's an accessory that can be added on to the portable unit. So you can drink the water as well as soaking in it. That's important because if you sip on the water throughout the day, it keeps those blood gases available to be utilized even when you're outside of the tub.
Those bubbles will be in that bottle essentially indefinitely. There's several different gases in there. There's products out there that have hydrogen-rich water, but that stuff dissipates. It just disappears. You can't hold it in there for very long.
You have to chug your hydrogen water immediately.
Ideally.
Yeah. Well, we have a tub available here in Dripping Springs, Texas, for people to come and experience this wonderful, magical water. I want to end this call here sharing a little story with you, Charles, that this is my first time hearing today that this tub was originally your project with chickens. I have this thing with chickens where Alex knows this. Like, I believe that chickens are the bird of God. And I've had these really phenomenal experiences with chickens as this sacred vessel of God. And you said that you're not the inventor, God is the inventor of this work. And when you shared that with me, I had a little laugh inside of myself because they've always been this totem of the divine. And when we were in the Biltmore in Asheville, they have this huge mural of all the angels and celestial realms in the library there at this mansion. And the only animal on that mural, the only earth creature on that mural were chickens. And I was like, see, they are the bird of the celestial realm. I loved how this water came through when I was doing soul journeying and going into different realms of meditation and consciousness and healing realms. I would always be placed into healing waters. Before we knew about this water, I was crying to Alex, are our healing waters? Where are the healing waters of earth? I'm so grateful to you, Charles, for bringing this into our lives. You changed my life through these waters being a huge part of me being able to be here on this planet still.
Amazing testimony. Amazing. My doctorate's in divinity, so I'm actually a minister, and I don't claim any of this as personal pride. So refreshing to hear. My whole journey is to bring this to the masses. We've been going down the wrong branch in healing for so long that we need to get people onto the narrow path again. And this is just one of those modalities that the Creator provided in order to help that happen.
All praise and glory goes to God.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Charles, for joining us. Thank you, Alex. It has been a wildly enriching conversation covering all aspects of truly what this water is. I hope that this conversation has been informative, rewarding. I will make sure that all links to contact everyone who's here are in this detailed description below this video. And until next time.